And I would love for you all to type into the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. My name is Meredith Burks. I work with Red Leaf Press, and I am currently in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hello, Lisa, also from Minnesota. Great to have you with us. Awesome. Seattle, Texas. All right, I'm going to start with just as people are typing in aloha from Hawaii. Wonderful. All over. This is amazing. Just to take this time to remind you, if you can change your chat to all panelists and attendees. In these webinars, we normally get a lot of really rich conversation happening in the chat. We want to make sure that we capture all of that for everyone. So change that drop down to all panelists and attendees. Also, we always save time at the end to take your questions. So as Tamar is presenting, if you have a question you'd like her to address, please use the Q&A function. That way I'm not missing anything in the chat. That Q&A will just kind of help me stay a little more organized. So feel free at any point to type into the chat a question for Tamar. And oh.
Sorry, everyone.
That's okay. PowerPoint got away from us for a second. So I'm going to just take a few moments here to introduce our guest speaker. Tamar Jacobson has a doctorate in early childhood education from University at Buffalo. She's a retired professor from Rider University in New Jersey, where she served as the chair of Department of Teacher Education for many years. And over the course of her career, Dr. Jacobson has received several accommodations, including Director of the Year Award from the National Coalition of Campus Children's Centers, the National Association of Early Childhood Teacher Educators Outstanding Early Childhood Teacher Educator Award, and is a former fellow in the Child Trauma Academy. She is also, of course, the author of Everyone Needs Attention, Helping Young Children Thrive. Another book, Don't Get So Upset, Helping Young Children Manage Their Feelings by Understanding Your Own. And she also edited a collection of essays, Perspectives on Gender in Early Childhood. So with that, I want to get straight to it because I know we're going to have a lot of questions. So Tamar, I'm going to pass it over to you. And thank you so much again for taking the time to be with us today.
I'm so excited to be here with everyone. Thank you, Meredith. So off we go. What you see on the screen now is my email address and my website. So you can check me out on the website to see who I am and why I am and what I am. And I'll talk about that very briefly in the next slides. And there's my email address in case we don't get to things today, which I'm sure we won't. This is a tough and emotional and big topic. So please feel free to email me if you have any ideas or thoughts that you'd like to sort of communicate with me about. And in this first slide, you see me as a child, as a very, very young child. And I like to put that picture up as we start to help us think about who we were. In other words, this person who we are now has that little person still inside them. Because we're going to be talking, I'm going to be talking, and you're going to be asking questions, of course, but I'm going to be talking a lot about how we came to be who we are and how that affects how we discipline children and how we feel about children needing our attention. So this little person with those mischievous eyes is me. You can see I was a little bit disrespectful with my dollies at the time. I'm not anymore. I like to see that picture because it's feisty little girl. She's somewhere there inside me. Plus, it reminds me that I'm still very close to my early childhood. I am still dealing with issues and situations from my earliest childhood. So she reminds me of that every time. I think it's also helpful for you if you put up a picture that you love of yourself when you were little, so that you can reconnect with your early childhood as well. That helps, especially when you're working with children. So Colleen was one of my students who felt that after she'd taken a class with me that she really understood the emotional power that teachers hold over children. Um, it's in a very emotional profession, actually. Young children are just bundles of emotion, and they're not sure how to express them, and they're not sure what they are. And we're pretty much like that still today as adults. We are full of emotions and we don't always know how or why we're feeling. So just quickly, I'm going to tell you how I came to be me. And you can see that there's that other little girl of me again in the corner there, a little bit shy there. I was pretty shy actually as a child. I wasn't as feisty as the first picture. Um, and so here are some of the things that I've done. And the reason I tell you these things is so that you understand where I'm coming from in my thoughts, in my ideas, in my beliefs. Because a person who presents to you is a bundle of all kinds of things, experiences and education. So I was born in what was Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. And when I was 19, I went to live in Israel, and there I became a preschool teacher. And I lived there for 19 years and was a teacher of children ages 2.5 through 5. I had 35 children, one aide in a one-room schoolhouse. Um, and I used to wear the children. I would carry them on my back. I would hold them because I didn't like to leave children standing and crying. I used to take care of them in that way. And when I was about 38, I had the opportunity to come to Buffalo, New York, and get a number of degrees because I only had an associate's degree when I came to America 33 years ago. And about 16 years ago, we moved to Philadelphia because my husband got a job at Temple University. And that's when I became a professor at Rider University. I was the director of the University of Buffalo Child Care Center. So for about 11 years, and that's a lot of experience with children 6 weeks to 5 years, an inclusion program, about 55 staff. So these are parts of my life experience that gives me the knowledge and the ideas that I have. Um, and now I'm just not just, but I'm an early childhood development and education consultant. I'm an advocate for children, but mainly for their emotional development, social emotional development. I probably because when I look back emotionally, I wasn't very respected as a young child. I had quite a tough time growing up with my mother. So I want children to have a better deal of it. I'm an author, as you heard, and I'm a blogger. I'm a life partner, which means I'm married. Um, I'm a mother. I have one son who's now going to be 48 pretty soon, and just recently became a grandmother. So that's some of my life experience and some of my educational experience. There are three things that I have learned from all these years of caring about young children. Compassion is really important. And in that slide, you can see me holding my son. We were in the Sinai Desert in Israel, and I'm wearing a sort of galabiya, and I'm holding him because he was cold and he was sad about something. But I think compassion is very important when we're working with children and families. It's different to kindness. It's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes, understanding the human condition. It goes deeper than just being kind. It's a feeling like you know that people have pain. I think it's critical in our work, and if we haven't got it, we need to learn how to develop it somehow. I also believe that we should have compassion for ourselves, but that's another whole presentation. I wrote an article about that in the childcare information exchange, because I think that's, if we want to have compassion for children, we need to have compassion for ourselves too. Playfulness, I think, is very important when we're working with young children. That doesn't necessarily mean that we sit down in the dramatic play and play with children. It means that we have a playful spirit, that we have joy, that we can uh, get into the minds and souls of children by remembering our own childhoods in a way and how we used to feel. And I think that that helps. I've been in so many classrooms where teachers look so bored, and there's a kind of heaviness, there's no joy. So playfulness is very important. And last but not least is that emotions are very complex. I'm not against emoticons or emojis. I use them pretty well myself. But emotions are much more complex than that. Happiness, joy, sadness, anger, these are complex emotions, and we all express them in different ways. We all feel them in different ways. We were all taught in our earliest childhood how to express them or how not to express them. So when we are dealing with emotions with children and our own emotions, it's important to remember that this is complex. There's no right way, wrong way, black and white way. It's very, very complicated and intricate. For example, if a child has experienced a lot of beatings, that's going to be connected to love, because very often parents beat their children and say, I'm doing it because I love you. So love sometimes can be connected with pain. That's complex. Sometimes if children are very joyful or uh, rough and tumbling and so forth, adults get very anxious. So joy is tempered, like it seems to be a bit dangerous to be so happy. So every time we're dealing with an emotion, we're dealing with quite a lot of complexity. Now, one of the most important things I think when we're dealing with ourselves and working with children is relationships, because that's going to make or break a child's emotional development. Relationships are right at the heart of learning. If you haven't got a strong relationship with your teacher or your parents or whatever, learning is going to be very difficult. So again, those pictures that you see of me and my son as he was growing up, and the final one is actually after my first book at a book party. He was crying when someone was talking about me in a nice way, and I went to give him a hug. But I love this quote from Bruce Perry, who talks about brain development actually. The more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely she will be able to recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. So think about ways that maybe you were disciplined as a child. And if we were in a room together, I'd have you share that now. All the different ways that you were disciplined as a young child by your the parents or guardians as you were growing up. Don't think about ways that you've seen other people disciplined or how teachers disciplined you. Think about your family and how they disciplined you, and what are some of the ways. And I know that you've all had different experiences with that. Um, so I'm going to bring you to the next slide, which shows you all the ways that people have shared with me in workshops. Doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the culture, doesn't matter where I am. Once I was at Oxford University um, doing a presentation with a whole bunch of people from all over the world, all kinds of people. A person from Nigeria who was a health and human service person. They all experienced something like some of these things that you see on the screen now. And if I asked you just to look at the screen and to see which of some of the ways that you might have been disciplined, you might answer things to me as I've heard over the years, that this looks like somebody wants to have power over me. This feels very threatening. It feels painful. Some people have used the term child abuse, fear. These are some of the things that people have said to me in workshops when they look at this list after they've shared with me some of the ways they were disciplined. And these are always from people who work with young children. So I'm thinking, if if so many of us were disciplined in this way, in some of these ways, and we go into a classroom and, for example, if a child answers us back and we can't slap them on the mouth like we were slapped, we sometimes just stand there helpless, like what can we actually do? Because we don't have the tools, we don't have the memory of support during that time. So what I'd like to suggest is that some of these ways, and I know that not all of you have experienced all of these things or any of these things, but a lot of us have, including me. Is there one there about mouth washing out with soap? I've had that, for example, right? Throwing beans on the floor to be picked up. That was a new one that I heard recently. So I'd like to suggest that all these ways of being disciplined is not really how we understand the term discipline. It means to teach. And in fact, if we look at the word discipline, we might see in it the word disciple. And if we think of disciple, we might think of these kinds of ways that Jesus taught his disciples. Or in Greek times, when you studied with your own mentor, you were guided to understand things. There was compassion and understanding about where you came from, who you were, what you were feeling at the time, and a lot of metaphors and allegories to share with you, stories that taught you, and you would also learn from example. And in Jesus' teachings, there's a lot of forgiveness for our transgressions. That's not quite the same as those things that many of us experienced. So this isn't discipline, this stuff. This doesn't coincide with what disciple reminds us of, or that the word discipline meaning to teach. It's more like punishment. So very often when we are thinking about disciplining young children, we're actually sifting it through our experience, our brain memory of punishment. Two very different things. So let's first think about how we acquired our worldview, our mindset, because we were all taught a way of looking at life, our perspective, right? From our parents, from our grandparents, from society as we were growing up. Some of us were taught that the world is very dangerous out there. You've got to be prepared for harsh times. Some of us got the opposite extreme. Everything is so trusting and it's all full of hope and kindness, and everybody understood us and so forth. I don't think many of us experienced that, but quite a few. Or maybe we had something in between that created our worldview, how we see the world, our perception of how things could be. So here are a few examples of mindset. For example, if we think that discipline is helping a child solve a problem, it's different from punishment making a child suffer for having a problem. That's a mindset. So I'd like to help a child solve this problem, or I'd like to really punish him for even having the problem at all. That's a mindset. If we think of a child as behaving badly, this is bad behavior, we're more inclined to think of punishment. But if we think of our child as struggling to handle something difficult, not knowing what to do, that encourages us to help them through their distress. That's a mindset. And once I was on the NAEYC forum, I can't remember what it was called, but anyway, somebody asked a question about how do I deal with difficult children in a 2-year-old classroom? That's a mindset, because all 2-year-olds are very complex. It's just the way they are developmentally. They're all very egocentric. They're all coming out of infancy and becoming toddlers so that they can toddle away. So they want to be independent, but they still need us. So they're very confused. So they're not difficult, they're just two. But if we think of them all as difficult, that's a mindset. It also doesn't have any knowledge of child development, because we're not understanding that 2-year-olds are very complex little people. It's very hard to be independent but still need you all at the same time. And adults are going through a lot of trouble, especially parents when their children are in their twos, because their little baby that used to need and love them so much is now wanting to toddle away and saying no all the time and being independent. So this is a mindset. So we first have to, not first, but while we're working with children, we have to come to grips with how did we acquire our perception about how children should or shouldn't be. And that comes from our own childhoods and how we were disciplined or how we were taught how to think about things. So I think what I'd like to suggest is that we filter our discipline strategies all the time through emotional memory of punishment. And we have to make connections between how we feel with what we actually do. And that some of you are going to say, well, I haven't got time for that. I've got so many children that I have to take care of, and I've got paperwork to do, and I've got to make sure everybody's safe, and I've got to work with parents, and I haven't got time to sit around making connections with how I feel with what I do. I love Anna Tardos from the Pickler Institute, where she says it's not just about technique, but how I am with myself. How do I know myself? How do I know what I feel? So I'm going to suggest that we don't, it's not a one-time thing, and it's not very simple. It's that we're all the time reflecting about how we feel with what we're doing. Sometimes we take it home and we write about it a little bit. I wonder why this child pressed my buttons today, or whatever. But if we can think about it, that we have emotional memory of punishment very often, and yet we want to discipline children because it's so important that they have boundaries and know how to live in the world with us all, then we have to start making these connections. It's very emotional working with disciplinary situations with children, both from our end because of how we were disciplined and how we expect things to work, and how society also expects things to work. I always remember getting on an airplane long ago before the pandemic, and there was a mother who got on behind me with I think the child was about 17 months old, 16 months old. And she was getting into her seat and she was apologizing to everyone around her, even before the child murmured. So she was all worried about how people were going to respond. It's very emotional, and we're tested all the time. We don't get it right all the time. Sometimes it takes a long time to get it right, whatever that means. So let's narrow the focus now from discipline and think only about a child doing things for attention. Over the years, I've heard many teachers say, help me, how do I deal with a child who needs attention? So I think we need to think about what that actually means. For example, oh, she's just doing it for attention, just ignore her. Think of that sentence. That's a complex sentence right there, right? If I'm doing it for attention and then you ignore me, that's going to make it kind of worse because I'm doing it for attention. So then we have to go to what is attention? Because I feel that many people believe or feel that needing attention is a bad thing. It's not a good thing. And I think that's because when we were growing up, we were with people who were very busy. Their lives were stressful sometimes. And when we needed their attention, they couldn't always give it. So they told us that we have to stop needing it. But little children need attention. Think about attention from all these different angles. Why do we need it? Do we deserve it? How does it feel to get it? I know some people get very uncomfortable if they receive too much attention. My son is a jazz pianist, and a really good one. But he got very uncomfortable with getting attention when he would play in his quartet and so forth, which was interesting to me. So he would get quite shy and quite weird about that. Um, is it all about look at me, acknowledge me, validate me, love me? What is it about? Have we always longed for it? And how did we lose it? Maybe we had a lot of it until we were about 2. And then along came our baby brother. And then everybody shifted the focus to the new kid. And all of a sudden, I'd lost it. Maybe it was like that. And when we think of the question, why do we need or deserve attention? Well, young children need our attention to survive and to thrive. They learn about who they are from us, from our reactions, from how we love them. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that they need also to self-regulate. We'll talk about that in a second. But let's just first understand the whole concept of it. And of course, we can't just understand it in a few minutes now, but it's something to think about, some of those questions. Here are some complexities and connections about needing attention. For example, there's this theory out there, and it's still out there, like that mother with the 17-month-old baby on the plane, who was worried that the baby was going to make noise even before she even sat down. Because we kind of have this feeling that children should be seen and not heard, and that the good child is the obedient one who's self-regulating and dealing with things on their own, which is kind of weird, because as teachers, we're there, or as caregivers, we're there to guide children and help them. That's our work. So we don't want them to be seen and not heard. We want to hear them. We want to understand them. And they don't have to all the time listen to us, because we want them to think critically and become, good citizens of the world who know how to think about stuff and to ask questions. And what does it mean to self-regulate? Let's get into that in a minute. There's this mindset or attitude that if somebody's seeking too much attention, that maybe they're just performing. They don't really need it. They're just doing it, which means that we don't take people seriously, because we say, oh, she's always doing that. And we don't understand why she's always doing that. What is the need there? Why is the need? Which doesn't mean we have to give her everything she wants. But how do we understand that person? And how do we share attention? Like the little 2-year-old who now has to share attention with the new baby brother. That's, as you can see, the last point there, birth order or losing our lover. I like to equate, like if I'm 2 and I've had my mom and dad and grandparents and everybody notice me a lot, and then along comes my baby brother. It's almost like losing my lover. It's like if my husband would come home with a new girlfriend and say to me, I want her to share your clothes, and I want you to love her as much as I do. Well, I mean, we wouldn't stand for it, would we? But little children have to just sort of grow up suddenly and accept this terrible ache, this loss, that nobody's looking at me anymore. And I've suddenly got to be big. And so I start wetting my pants because I can't be big. I want you to take notice of me like you used to. And then some people get angry with me because I'm not big, but I'm not big yet. I'm only 2 still, right? So sharing attention. And as teachers, we feel that very strongly with young children, because we have so many children to take care of that we can't keep on being with the one child who needs us so desperately sometimes. And for all kinds of reasons. Think of yourself as adults when you sometimes wake up in the morning after a bad dream and you go off to work and you're feeling a little bit down or whatever. It would be so nice if someone would just put their arm around you and give you a cup of tea, right? And that doesn't always happen. It's the same for little children. When they leave home and they come to school, we don't know what they've been through until they get there and how they're feeling. So sometimes they just don't want to share me with everybody else. They want me all for themselves. It's kind of normal to want that. Um, that doesn't mean they have to get it, but if we understand it, or even better, if we understand what happened to us as children when we needed attention, how did adults relate to us about that? Because that's where we form our mindset. Do we want it too much? And what's the right amount? So these are some questions to think about. And of course, in the book, I write about this. So, you're able to sort of work with it a little bit with yourself. How did you seek attention when you were a young child? And what makes you uncomfortable or comfortable about wanting attention? How do you, is there shame attached to it? Do you feel guilty? Is that how you were made to feel? Or is that what you observed around you? That's me again, by the way, saying shh and wearing a very fancy hat, I might add. And how does the way you sought attention and how you feel comfortable or uncomfortable about wanting attention, how does that influence you when you're giving attention or withholding attention from children? How is your mindset about that affecting it? And what happens to you emotionally when a child asks for attention? Do you think of it as demanding your attention? Or do you think of it as a need that's quite normal for a child to have? If we feel that way, that it's quite normal developmentally for a child to want our attention, we might not get so upset about it. We might not be able to give it all the time, but we won't get so guilty and worried that we can't give it right then and there. For example, if you're reading a story and there's a child who really needs our attention, sometimes just getting up and stroking his head or touching his shoulder while you're talking to the children and reading at the same time could be enough. Maybe not, but sometimes that's all that it takes. Depends how you feel about it. Do you get angry? Oh God, there he goes again, needing my attention while I'm trying to read to everyone. What does he expect of me? How do we feel about that? Can we hear our parents talking to us in that way? And so we transfer it onto children. So let's think about this. What would happen if instead of saying she's just doing it for attention, we said she's just doing it for relationship? Now, when we say that, it's going to shift our attitude because that negative concept, seeking our attention, now becomes she's doing it for because she needs relationship. And now we can't just ignore her because she's doing it because she wants some kind of relationship with me. I'm not sure what, but that's what she's asking for. So then I've got to think about relating to her instead of ignoring her. Dan Siegel and Tina Bryson wrote a really good book called No Drama Discipline. I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of good information, a lot of good advice there. And I like how they determine the difference between attention and spoiling. Because many people will say to me, well, if I give them too much attention, I'm spoiling them. So they define it as attention as a need for all children everywhere. And spoiling is giving them too many things. And then I find this interesting that when we keep rescuing them from an emotional challenge, or we never allow them to deal with defeat and disappointment, right? When we jump in to save them immediately, that's spoiling them. Not that we should let them be too frustrated or whatever, but sometimes allow them some time and space to solve a problem, right? Instead of immediately solving. And then they say that we can never spoil children by giving them too much of our love and attention. And I would replace the word attention with relationship, just to help us think of it and shift the mindset a little bit. So I want to talk a few minutes about self-regulation, because that's a really big topic these days, and seems very important that we children learn to self-regulate. And somehow, while I think it's very important, because in order to live in the world with adults, and to be a productive citizen, we can't always get what we want, and we need to be able to regulate ourselves. But young children are coming to that, and they need our help with it. They can't do it on their own. And sometimes I feel that we become punitive with children because we want them to learn it on their own. That's why we're timing them out all the time. If you can't get what you want, then go and sit there and think about it. And by the way, I've interviewed children in timeout situations, and they're not always thinking about the things that you want them to think about. So all it does really is just put them aside and get them out of our hair for a minute. It doesn't really help them solve the problem or learn how to understand that they've got to sometimes get on with it on their own. It's not a gentle way of teaching them that. So I think we have to think about self-regulation and punishment together in how we deal with it. We have to be very, very careful about that. When we're teaching children or taking care of children, are they our priority, or do we have other priorities, right? I hear often teachers say that when children seek our attention, it's a disruption to the class. And I'm wondering if reading that story is as important as us relating to children altogether. And I'll give you a small example about that. When I was a teacher in Israel, I had a little girl. Every time we'd sit down for circle time, she'd stand in the middle of the room and just yell. And we didn't know how to deal with it. My aide and I, my assistant and me, we didn't know what to do. We tried everything. The assistant would take her out sometimes for a little walk while I did circle time and so forth. And one day I was just beyond, I was didn't know what to do anymore. So I just said to all the children, let's just sit and listen to her. She just seems to want us to hear her. And it was an uncomfortable circle time for about 15 minutes because she screamed. She just stood there screaming. And the children were shifting in their seats and getting very uncomfortable until one of them, I would say things like, and I hadn't planned this. It wasn't something I'd read in a book. I just was beyond knowing what to do. At one point, one of the children said, maybe she needs some water. And I said, maybe you should get her a glass of water then. And the child went and got her some water. And so she kind of stopped yelling for a minute and drank the water, kind of looking at this other child. And then another child, because of that, another child said, maybe she needs a tissue and so forth. And it wasn't more than 15 minutes, the whole thing. And at the end, she had stopped yelling. And I said, are you okay? And she sort of nodded a bit, and I held her a little bit, and everybody was sitting around. And she finally sat down next to me on a chair, and we read the book or whatever it was that we were going to do, and she never did it again. So I don't know what happened there, but I do know that as a community, the children were helping her, and that was so much more valuable, I think, than even the story we were going to read. Now, I'm not saying you should always do that, and it's difficult to have a child yelling and have your supervisor walk in and you haven't got peace in your classroom. But it makes me think, is seeking attention really a disruption? For example, if I'm giving a workshop and somebody asks me a question off topic, it's kind of helpful actually, because then I can go in a different direction and we can maybe learn different things from each other. So, I mean, if I'm thinking about children as a priority and attention as disruption, these are interesting ways to look at it. And again, I think it comes from our mindset. Self-soothing. I write very deeply about that in the book about an experience I had as a young child, a very painful memory with my mother. Children self-soothe sometimes and go through a lot of pain alone. And I don't know if we want to do that for children. So we have to think about how we were treated and how that influences our behavior. And if we have tolerance for nonconformist behavior, this is a big one. And it's connected to mindset. Do we want children to always behave the way that we think they should? Or do we understand the complexity? So I'm not giving you advice here. I'm saying that this is a very complex topic. Here's an expression about timeout from a psychologist called Roger Thompson that I thought was interesting. I think you can see it, but maybe I'll read it for you. For children, intense emotions are like I can't see that, so let's just move me a little bit away. Like a dark forest at night. The brain starts making associations. The child becomes overwhelmed with dark imaginings. And with timeout, we usher our children into the woods and just leave them there in the darkness. We tell them to sit silently, not move, and reflect on their actions. And we have no idea what they're thinking about. And now it's not moving. It's not moving now. There we go. So let's reimagine the concept of timeout. Maybe it could be for teachers and not children. Think about that. Here's some advice. And I always think that when I give advice, it works for me. It might not work for you because of my mindset and my own experience, life experience. What if we were having a really bad day with a certain child? And at a moment when we just couldn't take it anymore, we asked our assistant to just take over just for 5 minutes so that I can stand there and look at the class and think, if I was a child in my class, how would I like to be treated? And for 5 minutes, I might shift my feeling because I know how I'd like to be treated. I'd like to be heard. I'd like to be validated. I'd like to be treated with respect and love. These are some of the things that people have told me how they'd like to be treated. And if I think about that, I might come back in and just shift my attitude. Maybe. It's a thought. So here's the part where I'm going to frustrate you, I think, because I'm going to say that there are no magic solutions and that the answers lie within you. There are a lot of books and programs that give you specific strategies and prescribed methods to teach children self-regulation. And some of you will say, well, they just don't work for me. And that's where I'll say that we need to connect how we feel, how we were brought up, what is our mindset with what we do. So we sometimes need to just hold still, go home and journal about it. Not every day, but sometimes. Like this was a complicated day for me, and I couldn't work out why this child pressed all my buttons today. Just think about it. What would happen to me as a child if I would behave like that? How could I do it differently? If I was a child in my class, how would I like to be treated? And maybe you would discover that the child reminds you of someone you didn't like in your past, a sibling you had conflicts with, or maybe that the child reminds you of yourself. I don't know. We don't know always unless we stop and think about it. And sometimes you can't think about it in the classroom. So maybe afterwards. But have some faith that it's within you. These are just some things that I've heard over the years. Kristen and Sabrina were students of mine who wrote these things in their evaluations. And I have ways of giving you examples and describing this, but it's very difficult in this format to do that. But if you think about little 2-year-olds as being brave instead of terrible, you know, they're little people, and yet they say to us, no. And we could slap them. We probably sometimes do, right? But they need to do that because they need to find out who they are and be independent. So they're pretty brave when they're 2. And if we could only learn to just scoop them up and say, you know, I know you don't want to do that, but right now we have to. And they could be screaming and yelling, but we can still be kind to them while they're doing that. That's our role, is to make them understand that they can't right now. And I loved the way Sabrina said, you don't have to hurt me to teach me. Think about this. There is no safe place for teachers to go. No, there's no support group where I could sit and talk about how I feel about certain children and how my own childhood affects how I'm working with children. There's nowhere to go. Counselors can refer their patients or their clients, and they get supervision all the time. But we don't give that to our teachers. And I would so love it if we could. Because when I'm talking about internal ethnography, I'm talking about self-reflection about who we are. And we need some space to do that when we're doing this very critical and important work with young children. We need to find out, what is our emotional script? What did we learn as young children about ourselves? I always learned my self-worth was wrapped up in helping others, specifically my mother, emotionally. If I would help her, maybe she would notice me. In the end, she never did. So now I'm just learning that I don't have to only help people to be loved. I can be me. We can learn about what our feelings are. We can write about it. We can journal about it. We can interview our parents and find out what it was like when we were children. I love to draw about it, our emotions. And if we were together, I might get you to draw a little bit and discuss our drawings. And of course, I've been in therapy all my life, and I still am, and I love it. I learn more and more about who I am and why I am. And it helps me very much in relating to other people. And these are some questions that I think would be helpful to you to think about. I have them in the book too. They're just questions for you to reflect on, because these are all connected to how we received attention or had attention withheld from us, relationship withheld from us, and that affects how we relate to children. Think about it. If we said, she's doing it for relationship, instead of she's doing it for attention, how our mindset would shift. This is from the conclusion in my book, and I kind of like this paragraph. It helps me think about it. So I'd like to share it with you. When stormy emotional rivers have thrashed around me, why did you read it quietly to yourself for a minute instead of me reading it to you? Because of course you can read. That's why you're here. And then when you get to the end, think of children in that way. We relive our own childhoods over and over again, each time redeeming our own selves through their first-time discoveries, children, and their expressions of amazement. As teachers, let's be grateful for them and forgive them, and let's love them with all our might. And I'm going to stop now because there are going to be some questions, I think. These are some of my references that I have formed for this presentation. And at the bottom, you can see a link to an opinion piece that I wrote for Embassy News. And actually, it's quite a nice little summary of the whole book and could be helpful to you. So when you're seeing it again, or that might be helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tamar.
You're welcome.
I just want to say there was so much love in the chat for the mindsets that you are introducing. I want to thank all of our participants for being brave to share ways that they were disciplined as children. I really appreciate everyone being such active and engaged participants. And I do have a few questions here that I'm going to read for you. And I just wanted to mention as well that I will include a link to that article that Tamar put up, as well as Tamar's email, if she's willing to share that again
Yeah,
in the follow-up email. So I don't think we're going to get to everyone's questions. So if you would like to reach out to Tamar directly, thank you for being willing to do that for
yeah,
us.
absolutely.
So this was a pre-submitted question from Pamela. Could a child's behavior be linked to a parent's absence for a week due to work travel? Also, can siblings be a cause for a child to be disrespectful to adults and disruptive in the classroom? Lastly, what would you say and how do you respond to a child who knows behavior is not acceptable at home or at school, but chooses to behave in such a manner that he or she becomes defiant towards the teacher?
Complex question.
It is a complex question.
And
Absolutely.
certainly is going to press a lot of buttons for the teacher, that's for sure. I'm absolutely sure that a child will react to a parent's absence, for sure. Um, you know, and also it depends. Everything depends, of course. If you've got a solid foundation with your parents, you're going to feel a lot more secure than if it's a rocky road. If your parent is very aggressive, maybe, or you haven't got confidence or so forth, you're going to feel it more or less. So you have to kind of find out about the relationship between the child and the parent. If it's a strong relationship, the child might not miss the parent as much, funnily enough. If it's a little bit weaker, then it's going to be harder, of course. And of course, there's other influences. I might be great with my father when mom goes away. But when my new sibling comes along and mom goes away, then I feel like I'm losing everything because I feel like I've lost them anyway. So there's going to be all different ways of dealing with it, but it certainly can influence. So that's a complicated way to answer it, I suppose. Sure, if my sibling is bigger than me and gets away with all kinds of stuff and says all sorts of things, and I want to be as big as them and as bravado as them, I'm going to probably learn to be quite disrespectful. But that's not only the way. I mean, it might also be just from society. Children hear a lot of things all over the place. Well, maybe not in the pandemic so much, but adults are not always very respectful around children. So children are learning from everybody, not just their siblings, but certainly siblings can affect. Think of your own siblings and how they affected you, right? This thing about a child who knows behavior is not acceptable. There we go. We think they're adults, children. Sometimes they do understand that it's not okay, but they still need us anyway. And it's again a complex situation. I need to find out why they need me so much in that particular manner. And maybe I can change them needing me in a different way. Maybe I can understand that they are very needy of me in that particular way. Maybe that's the only way they get attention at home, for example, by doing things that are anti-appropriate, right? They get smacked around a lot. It's better than nothing if I'm not getting any attention. It's complicated in all these issues. You're going to have to find out what's going on. But also, what happens to you, Pam? What happens inside you when these things are going on? When you say, this child knows how to behave and it's not acceptable, I don't know. There's something there for you to think about you and how you were brought up and what happened to you. Maybe. Just something to think about.
And this question comes from Tori. This year,
I
my
wish I
class,
could see Pam.
I know,
Okay, sorry. Tell me
that's
about.
okay. Yeah. One day we will be able to all be in person, and this
Right,
will be
right,
an
right, right.
amazing several day retreat that we'll put on together tomorrow.
Of course.
Um, and also, I just want to agree with the comments in the chat about your voice, Tamar. It's very calm. It's so soothing to listen to you.
Oh,
So
thank
I
you.
could do it all day as well. Lots of people
Thank
commenting
you, all
about
of you.
that. So This is from Tori. This year, my class is a mix of young threes, older threes, and fours. The older threes and fours are doing well in the class academically and socially, but the younger ones are struggling a bit. Specifically, one girl, S, who is best friends with another M in the class. Both are young threes. M is doing great socializing, but S mostly talks to M, rarely interacts with other students, and even when they speak to her, she doesn't respond. She gets very upset, even physical, with M when she plays with other kids. Recently, her behavior was extreme, kicking books that other kids were reading, yanking mask chains, and biting. Nothing ignited this behavior, and she shuts down when teachers try to talk to her and why she did it, even if she's sad or upset. The parents say this behavior is only at school. What can the teachers do to help her use her words and not resort to shutting down or harmful behavior towards other kids? A definite call for help from Tori on this one.
Yeah, poor Tori. That is quite a handful there. I'm thinking about the younger threes and the fours. Mixed age grouping is very good. The research shows. So I'm okay with that. The question about mixed age grouping is making making each child individual in how they're learning. Because when I'm thinking of the younger threes academically not as strong as the fours, are our expectations the same for all ages? Or that's something to think about in terms of child development. Maybe they're all developing in the way they're supposed to, but maybe the teacher, Tori, or anybody, maybe the director's expectations of the younger ones is to be like the older ones. That's something to think about, because I can't imagine that all the younger ones are weak academically and the older ones are strong academically. There's something about child development in there and attuning the curriculum to the mixed age. And if I'm wrong about that, Tori, just shoot me an email and we can continue that conversation about that particular topic. Um, S sounds to me like she's still a toddler, that she's not quite three in terms of emotional development. And I'm not sure why that is. I'd need to know more information about her family and how they are, if she's got an older sibling or if her parents are very I don't want to say uh, protective of her at home, maybe, and she's shy and she's nervous. And this other child, M, is reminds her somehow of her sibling or her parents or something like that. She sounds to me like she's pretty young emotionally, and that's why she's reacting in that way. Um, there's something about expectations here in terms of the ages of the children. She certainly, we don't want her to be kicking and hurting and things like that. You know, I would carry her on my back, you see, and make her feel safe with me if I could. That's what I would do with her, because she's not safe. She's not feeling safe, that she's latched onto this poor M who has to take care of her all the time. I wonder how M is feeling, actually. She might be feeling quite burdened by little S. I'm not sure. So again, it's a complicated thing. Tori, I think you and I need to talk.
Thank you for that answer. We are running close to time, so I've seen a couple of comments in the chat, and I just want to reiterate, yes, I will be emailing a certificate for this, the one that is on the screen right now. So you'll be receiving a PDF for everyone who's attended today. You should see that later today within a few hours of the reporting. And Tamara, if you don't mind going to the next slide. I also wanted to do a save the date. We're going to be doing another webinar in May. This will be a conversation with the co-author Thomas Randon of Saving Play, Addressing Standards Through Play-Based Learning in Preschool and Kindergarten. And we're going to kind of focus it around play in the era of COVID. So that will be May 10th. We'll send out a registration link when it's available as well. And if you don't mind clicking to the next one. I also wanted to take a moment to share some information about the Think Small Institute. Think Small is a parent company of Red Leaf Press. We are the publishing division, so we do all of these great resources. The books we mentioned by Tamar are available from Red Leaf Press. And Think Small Institute is doing virtual trainings right now. So they are small group and really high quality trainings that are going to excite, engage, and elevate your practice. There's if they are in if you're in Minnesota, these trainings through the Think Small Institute are through Develop, so you'll receive your KCF credits through them. And I will include a link to the training calendar in the chat here, sorry. And also in the follow-up emails as well. So if you want to check out, these again are a little bit longer. They're at least 2 hours, and there are some fees involved with those, but they are amazing trainings. So I wanted to make sure to mention that. And if you don't mind clicking to the next slide, Tamar. And because you have joined us, we are offering you 25% off Tamar's books. This content was based around Everyone Needs Attention. I have read the book and I was just feeling so invigorated by today's. I mean, the story about circle time and is that book as important as connection? Just that really got me. I'm glad I was off camera for that story. So we are offering code TAMAR, gets 25% off this book. It's valid for about a month. I think it expires, May 16th. So you can get that on redleafpress.org. And then if one more slide for me. I know we have a lot of international people who have joined us today, so I wanted to let people know that all of our Red Leaf Press books are available through our partners, our international partners. If you are joining us from Canada and you want to save some shipping cost and any sort of additional fees, that Logan Canada is our partner in Canada, in Australia and New Zealand through Patamillan, and pretty much everywhere else through Eurospan. And we're going to follow up with an email with all of that information, and the code is TAMAR, and that is just through direct orders through Red Leaf Press. But I wanted to make sure our international partners and friends had this information as well. So thank you everyone again for being here. I really appreciate the time. I'm going to put the code one more time. In the chat there.
Oh, I see.
So everyone can capture that. But like I said, you should see an email from us within the next couple of hours as well. So thank you, Tamar, so much. That was incredibly inspiring, a great reminder about mindset. And I really encourage everyone to pick up her book as well, just to kind of continue this journey. And we'll also include Tamar's email. So if you want to reach out to her directly, thank you for being open to that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity. It was so lovely to talk to all of you. Lovely to see you, Meredith.
Thank you. You too. We'll be in touch. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.